You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 10, Iowa and the Right, featuring Gavin Aronsen. Welcome to Fruitless. I am joined today by Gavin Aronsen of the Iowa Informer and a lot of other stuff. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick here?
I founded the Iowa Informer, which is independent, now kind of lapsed for the time being anyway, publication. It did have a print version at one point. Before that, I did a bunch of other stuff. I was a city reporter at the Ames Tribune, and then I went to grad school and taught some entry-level undergrad classes at the Iowa State Journalism School. Freelance sometimes.
Yeah.
And do some podcast stuff. My friend Kelly Bevins and I, we had a podcast, Iowa Off Kilter, that maybe we'll get back to. We haven't done anything with that for several months, but we had 3 episodes that I thought were pretty good. So
yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah, good weird Iowa history stuff. So
yeah, a lot of fun to dig into at least.
A theme I've been kind of returning to on this show a lot is like making sense of the Midwest. And you've spent most of your professional career kind of keeping an eye on the state of Iowa politics, especially Iowa like right-wing politics. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of get your thoughts on how we, where we are in politics in Iowa and where you think it's going, which is a really vague question, but I'm sure we'll get somewhere interesting with it.
And a hard one to answer, but nobody knows, so I can say pretty much whatever.
Yeah, well, most of the people listening to this aren't from Iowa anyway, so you could probably just make shit up and they'd be like, oh, wow.
Well, I'll try not to do too much of that, but we'll see.
What would you, if you were talking to somebody from out of state, what would you say like the current place Iowa is politically? Where is it going right now from just like your vantage point?
I guess that depends on, who you're talking to, but I guess I would say, of course, it's not going in a good direction, and it's doesn't look very hopeful right now, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better. Pretty sure of that. There's a huge advantage the Republicans already have and have had for half decade plus now in governor's office, in the state house. They've controlled both branches of the Iowa State House since 2016 when Donald Trump was elected.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening here is not that different from what's happening around the country. And in the Midwest, a lot of what happened in Wisconsin is happening in Iowa. If you remember that union busting and privatization and just a hard, sudden rightward turn, at least from what I witnessed from out of state. I think I was at Mother Jones at the time when that happened in the early 2010s, doing a fellowship there and covering campaign finance and digging into that. So I do have a little background on Wisconsin. And then that's basically what ended up happening in Iowa. And a lot of these political operatives, they, of course, jumped from state to state. And there were, some from Wisconsin who just carried that model over to Iowa and, in their perspective, very successfully, I'm sure they would think.
Yeah. So we're seeing this like rightward pivot. You said like the early 2010s is like when you kind of was seeing that, at least in Wisconsin.
If I remember correctly, because I was on several projects when I was at Mother Jones. I was there for about 3 years. And when I was earlier on, I was doing campaign finance stuff. And I remember Wisconsin was one of the places, maybe that was before it happened, but Scott Walker, and that's Scott Walker, right?
Because like the old conventional wisdom, at least from I remember growing up, was that Iowa's like a swing state. It was kind of framed that way anyway. That it's kind of on a 50-50. It could go either way. I mean, didn't it go for Obama right during the? But something seems to have like shifted I don't know. It feels like palpable in the air here. It feels like there is a pretty strong right wing direction. What do you think what do you think you could hold responsible for that, if anything specific?
I should have prepared for that one better because I knew you were going to ask something like that. Uh, it is interesting that Iowa went for Obama and then turned around and went for Trump.
Yeah.
But that happened, not just in Iowa. That was none of these trends are unique to Iowa, but it's something that before it happened in Iowa. I of course hoped it wouldn't come here, but it's really
But
it
here
has
it
swept
is.
over
Yeah.
this has swept over the state and quite dramatically. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of factors, and there are a lot of people who have are more credentialed than I am, who I don't think have a great answer for all of that either. One thing in Iowa specifically is Mike Gronstall, Iowa Senate leader. He for a long time held on, and the Iowa Senate had a 26-24 majority of Democrats. And when he left office, all bets are off then, because that's when Republicans pretty much had their way with
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
And just whatever allure of Trump, people have all kinds of theories. And
Yeah.
I, Iowa demographically is changing, I suppose, but
Hmm.
it's more than that. And he was just
Hmm.
he caught on in Iowa, and people liked what he had to.
Had to say, yeah.
Yeah, that's a terrible response. I don't have a great answer
No,
for
but I
that.
mean, I think everybody has been, I mean, since 2016, kind of scrambling to figure out what the hell has been happening with the country broadly. And, not that there weren't like reactionary elements of the country before then, of course, but something just seemed to have flipped in the air.
And I think part of it is just I don't want to say polarization really, because I kind of hate that, because it kind of leads down
Yeah.
the road to this false dichotomy between the left and right both being,
Oh, two sides,
equally
oh,
bad. Yeah, which
right,
is
right.
not what's happening.
No.
But I mean, Trump, he just said whatever the hell he wanted to say, and I think that is, part of it. It really broke just all the conventional, accepted
Hmm.
conventions of politics and a lot of
Yeah.
norms that he showed pretty effectively that the only thing holding those together were the fact that people were accepting them as
Hmm.
the standards, and when you just blow that up, then things are
Yeah.
going to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a big part of what's happened here. You mentioned demographic changes. It's been a slow process Iowa's taking more and more immigrants in, and so there is kind of a demographic shift. Do you think there's kind of a racist reaction going on to that stuff that might be playing a role into this, or?
Yeah, and I think that also with Obama, there is this is not specific to Iowa, but I think David Remnick in the New Yorker interviewed him after Trump won the election in 2016, which I think most people failed to predict. I did not see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
So take my future predictions here with a grain of salt. But he said something that still sticks with me. He said, I think maybe I came around 10 or 20 years too early. And I don't know, if a black man or, a black man, because that's what happened, I was going to say, or a woman, but Clinton lost,
Mm-hmm.
but had a black president been elected in the future, I think there still might have been this racial backlash. And I think that it kind of emboldened a lot of these closeted racists, or not really, but
Yeah.
closeted, but they felt more comfortable speaking out. And I think the shift from Obama to Trump really kind of accelerated that, especially because
Yeah.
Trump campaigned on. I mean, he rose to political prominence specifically by fanning the flames of the birther conspiracy theory, and I think that played a role. I recently wrote a book review of Steve King's memoir, Walking Through the
I was gonna
Fire.
bring up Steve King here because he's to me a good example of that reaction to immigration and stuff. He's got that famous quote about knowing an illegal immigrant because of like the size of their calves or whatever. So like,
Yeah, the cantaloupe calves.
but yeah, so you wrote a review of Steve King's book.
Yeah, and I wrote that for Men Yell at Me, which is Liz Lenz's Substack. She's a prominent journalist who's based in Iowa, Cedar Rapids.
Hmm.
I believe she wrote for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and then the Iowa Republican Party basically ran a successful smear campaign against her and pressured the owners of the paper to fire her, which is a pretty shitty thing that
we should return to that story in a second. I don't know that story, but yeah, what were you saying about Steve King's book?
Substack. Since I wrote that review, and one of the things I tried to focus on in that was just how the Iowa Republican Party will claim that they took care of Steve King, and but they never truly grappled with his really very explicit racism and white nationalist rhetoric. They never even directly called it that. The Randy Feenstra, who beat him eventually in the 2020 primary, called his rhetoric caustic rhetoric, and that's about as far as he ever went. Racism never played a role in the primary, aside from there's like the elephant in the room. It's obvious like why Steve King became a politically toxic figure for the party, but they tolerated him up until that point. So, and one thing I wrote in the review too is that there's so many political figures in Iowa, in the state house, current elected representatives who are calling the shots, who supported Steve King for years, who have, more or less, broadly speaking, the same political views that he does, and who, are facing no consequences for any of that. They might, and they don't even conceal it all that well. They don't, spout, rhetoric straight from like a stump speech or like a Klan rally like Steve King kind of did with diversity is not our strength and things like that. It's pretty obvious where Steve King is getting his information, but I mean, effectively, it's really no different. They have the same worldview.
Yeah, it's King was kind of like an earlier version of the kind of what has become like Trumpism, right? It's the more mask off, like here's the straight up with the kind of racist stuff. Is like a lot of the Republicans in Iowa prior to Trump, in my memory anyway, had like an attempt to try to seem like, I don't know, more balanced, like, oh, they just happened to be conservatives, which they obviously they always held these views, but they were never, as explicit as like something just that kind of switched in 2016.
That's a fascinating thing about Steve King's story specifically, not to get too focused on him, but I mean, a lot of time focused on him very recently and also for months on end in the not too distant past. But he kind of, his time finally arrived. He got a one-on-one meeting with Trump in the Oval Office, which would be unheard of at any point in his political career before that. But at the same time that Trump ascended and that these xenophobic, racist, white, nationalist kind of ideas entered the mainstream of the Republican Party, Steve King, for whatever reason, was the guy who, that was his downfall as it was on its way up. So I think it's kind of an interesting study in contrast there, and something I try to focus on in some of what I read about him and discuss about him too.
You're saying that was kind of part of like King's downfall. It's kind of interesting that he like it's almost as if Steve King was a Trumpian politician like too early, because I think if he did the shit he was doing, like if he started his political career right now, I could see him being like a Ron DeSantis figure, like somebody people really like conservatives really like. But I mean they did like him, but yeah,
you look at who's in Congress now, and even, I mean, Steve King just maybe like unlocked his, what was his id, or I don't know, like his he. I mean, he was just flying to Europe and meeting with fascist political parties left and right and saying stuff that was just, I mean, for a while before I got used to it, it's like, holy shit, like he is really just going all out.
Yeah.
And, it was not certain for a while whether or not he was going to take it too far and actually face any consequences. And then the J.D. Scholten election in 2018 showed that, okay, yeah, he is vulnerable. But now you look at like Viktor Orban is they had the CPAC Hungary gathering, and I think he's invited to the U.S. CPAC. And he's
isn't that in Dallas this week? Actually, yeah, that's not good.
No, I mean, he's saying some like explicit like neo-Nazi kind of stuff, and been in the news not infrequently for it. So you could be right that it's very interesting to me, just the timeline of Steve King's downfall and the ascension of all this at the same time.
I was unaware of this, and you kind of said it there. This is before even all this. Steve King had flown out to meet Viktor Orban, or was it someone else in Europe you were referring to?
Well, I believe there's a photo of him with Viktor Orban in his memoir.
Oh
There's,
man,
there's a photo of several people. He has a whole chapter on Viktor Orban and like
really?
the Great Replacement. Yeah, here's
Wow.
Steve King in Hungary meeting with Viktor Orban right here.
Jesus. And what year is that? Does it say?
October 4th, 2016. So
So he was
that
on
was,
it.
yeah, he was
Yeah.
a what do you call that? An early adopter of the European
Yeah.
fascists.
Because you're seeing like the Viktor Orban is like I think it's really troubling, the kind of love affair that the American conservative movement is kind of having with him right now. You know,
It's
because it's not
very
just like this is beyond just like old, like, I don't know, kind of conservative capitalist stuff. This is like straight fascist, like open. What is the term? I don't know if Orban uses it or others use it about him, but like the illiberal democracy.
Yeah, I was
You
just
know?
gonna say that. Yeah, I mean, he really truly is. Yeah, he's used that term himself, I believe. And yeah, I mean, he's like a wannabe authoritarian, and
Hmm.
I mean, the George Soros is from there too, and Viktor Orban used to be like a protege of Soros, or he got funding from Soros Foundation or something. I forget
That's
the
really
details.
fascinating.
Yeah, then he basically like, kicked out. Like Soros had man, I don't remember the details, but he didn't Soros have a university or something there, or something that he forced out of the country or shut down. And there's this really nasty anti-Semitic smear campaign that the government orchestrated against him, and just really out in the open stuff.
Oh wow, I never made that connection. Like, I mean, I made the connection that stuff about George Soros was often anti-Semitic, but I didn't realize that had a connection to Hungary in that way. Yeah, I think Hungary is going to be, unfortunately, a pretty important country going forward for the right, because I think of like the role like the USSR or Cuba had for the far left in the US, where they would like, oh, you know, like a leftist intellectual would get to go tour the USSR or something like that. Like that's what Orban's doing with right wing figures right now. Is, you know, I think of like Rod Dreher just moved to Hungary recently.
Oh God, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he spent all of his career writing about how important it is to maintain family and keep your roots, and then he got divorced, ditched his kids, and moved to Hungary. So
Yeah, I followed that a bit. That guy is awful.
yeah, so that's interesting that there's like that direct connection to Hungary in kind of Iowa politics there with Steve King. So Steve King's like one of the bigger like right wing figures from here. I think
Also,
somebody
really quickly, also the Tucker Carlson is a big Orban stan,
Oh
and
yes,
he
yeah.
recently appeared at the Family Leaders Annual Summit in Iowa.
In Iowa. Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up, so might as well bring it up now. I because a lot of people were saying that he was hinting at running. What do you think, that Tucker's going to try to run in 2024 or not?
If I had to guess, no.
Your guess
I
is
mean,
no.
who the fuck knows? But they say that about everybody, and you know, maybe he's testing
Yeah.
the water because someone, you know, suggested that, or he's got some idea of that. But
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think he's
I almost am convinced he's going to run in 2024, but if he doesn't, I think he's going to get into electoral politics eventually here. Because I think Trump established that route that you can go from like media to.
Oh yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Like maybe he'd run as like a publicity stunt, which I think is, I mean, pretty well established. That's why Trump ran too, and then he just accidentally kind
Yeah.
of won. I mean, that's exactly what happened with him. And so yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe President Carlson. Jesus.
Jesus. Oh man. No, that was so funny because my Twitter people were starting to hum about like he might be about to announce he's gonna run, and I was like looking at where he was speaking at, and I realized it was a block away from where I was working at.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. I was like, you know, because I was downtown Des Moines.
Yeah.
I thought about trying to like go sneak in or something, but
I should have. I've just been so. I need to get back into doing some writing because I just I got really burned out on it,
Yeah.
and a lot was going on last year, and I just stepped away. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I wrote that book review, but I need to start getting back into it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you were a lot more active during the 2020 protests because you were working with Aaron Calvin. And I think that's kind of an interesting direction to maybe go to here for a
Yeah, sure.
second because I was going to mention another figure I think of as pretty important to understanding the right in Iowa right now is Kim Reynolds, and she really like. It was before 2020 that I was aware that she was like bad, obviously, that we had a bad governor. But it was during 2020 that you really got to see her like become this, I don't know, really a figure. Well, I guess it was also it was a combination of COVID and the protests because she was really, really failing with the COVID response. And then like notoriously, she like kind of hit a protester with her car during BLM.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jalen Cavill, who ended up
Yeah.
running for
Well,
office
yeah.
later on.
One of her drivers did.
Yeah, she didn't, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was just in the car that hit a protester. That's all. But no, I was gonna say like there was definitely a switch that happened in 2020 here as well because for me anyway, I know like it was a big moment of like I didn't expect the protests to get as big as they did in Des Moines for the bit that they were. But then, there was it kind of locked into step where it's like, okay, Kim Reynolds backing the cops. We're getting this like, emphasis on like trying to militarize DMPD. I don't know. Something really changed in 2020 for me, but I have a hard time putting my finger on what it was.
Well, that was fascinating to me because one of the things I did at Mother Jones when I was an intern there, and then got this fellowship that kept getting extended. And one of the reasons, or the reason I initially did, was because I was every like day after work, I was going to the Occupy Oakland protests. And that really turned me into the lunatic on Twitter I am today because I had like, they made all the new interns join Twitter if they weren't on it, which I wasn't, and then I just got like addicted to it basically. I mean, I was like also very into the movement. It was very fascinating to go there and talk to people and watch it. And just the militarized police response is nothing new in Oakland. They have a long, sordid history of it there. And like every day, like there are people saying like, "Oh, I woke up this morning just to like read your tweets from what you were doing, like getting up to the previous night." And so, I mean, I have a lot of. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Like a lot of my views on protests have been informed by that. That's actually those two posters. You can't really see them, but those are like Occupy Oakland posters there.
Oh, sick! Yeah.
But to like see that in Des Moines, that was the first time they had deployed tear gas, and I can't remember how long, just like ages. And I went to. I was just a girl I was dating at the time, and we were debating whether to go to the protest in Des Moines or Minneapolis. Not too long after the George Floyd murder. And we decided to go to Minneapolis because I was thinking, what could happen in Des Moines. That was like one of the wildest nights in Des Moines that we missed. But Minneapolis was wild too. There was a Wells Fargo on fire, and we took off because she didn't want to get in the middle of a riot, police showdown. They're on their way and about to issue dispersal orders. But I did end up going to Des Moines. Sorry for the long story here, but
no, you're good.
I was trying to figure out places to park, and I just was distracted, and I accidentally drove like right in front of the Capitol, and like right into a cloud of tear gas. And it's like I don't know how like I thought I could get through, but and then there's some protester. She opened the door and like jumped into my car, and then I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were somebody else." And she like jumped out. But it was pretty chaotic. It's like, what the hell? This is happening in Iowa. It was very exciting, and I of course there's a lot of blowback to that, and like all this awful like pro police stuff. But it was heartening to see that in light of just such an awful political environment for so long now in Iowa. To see, that's been the most inspiring thing. Really, is seeing some of the activism in Des Moines, particularly, is closest to where I've been. So
I mean, there was I don't know, I think that was probably the point I paid the most attention to local politics because it just, I don't know, it was a very visceral thing going on. And I know the Iowa Informer, this might be an interesting thing to bring up, was critiquing a lot of the way Des Moines media was reporting on, kind of the events that were going on. Especially Aaron was really harsh on some of that. Do you have any thoughts on that, I guess, or about how that was going down?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. Yeah, and you mentioned I was more active, I think, with the Informer, and I will say it's a lot easier to be have an active news organization when someone else is reporting for you. So that was great, and it was the way that Aaron got let go from the Register was a pretty shitty, underhanded situation, but I appreciated it in a way because it gave me a chance to collaborate with him a lot, and it was a lot of fun to do that and edit his work, and that really led to the Informer being the only voice that was not just parroting police narratives, basically. And if I do start publishing there again regularly, I would like to have that be a voice that's certainly part of what is on the site, because I think that's really important. And because I mean, the local media, you're in a like a media environment like New York or something like that. It's common for media to critique other media and stuff like that, and it's healthy. And it's not Iowa nice or whatever, but it's like people aren't used to it. They're like, hey, like, why are you being an asshole? We gotta band together. But I think journalists really do the news business or industry in Iowa a disservice by not calling out outlets like KCCI that just routinely just commit ethical violations left and right. It's just they're awful, and I mean that's why I go so hard after them, because I don't not enough people do.
I was gonna say there's probably something good to you and Aaron being recently let go under incredibly shitty circumstances. You had somebody working with you who had a vendetta against the Register, and maybe that was for the best. Like, I think the Register just kind of represents like Iowa's or Des Moines like media almost entirely like that in our local stations. It's very homogenous, and we do need more like left critical voices here, but there's just not a lot of it.
The Register's not all bad. I mean, the Register does some really good work, but it also publishes some real shitty stuff. It's like any major city newspaper. It's going to be a mixed bag, I guess. But and not much room there for left voices at all. An occasional op-ed or Iowa Voices column or something, but
but on the whole, it's a very like centrist thing. Although it definitely used to have like I did we were talking about history here. I did a research project like way back in the day, like for my like freshman year of college or whatever, where I was looking at different like newspapers' reaction to the Nazi rise to power in 1933. And actually the best paper that I read was the Des Moines Register, because AP and like the New York Times and a lot of them were like, this Hitler guy is probably not going to do that much. But the Des Moines Register had reporters in Germany, and they were like, what are you talking about? Goebbels just like led a chant that said lynch Jews. What do you mean this isn't going to be bad? This is clearly bad.
I'll have to renew my subscription to newspapers.com. I'd love to read some of that.
Yeah, I could try to dig up some of those, but I mean, it is interesting because Des Moines has I don't know, it was a good media source, but way better than a lot of local papers where they weren't just repeating AP and stuff, at least in the 30s.
Well, I was gonna say one thing to add, not about the 30s, but now it's easy to shit on media, and I think it's good to have criticism, and I think people who are closed off to it, I mean that's not the right approach, but print media is what it is. The industry is what it is now, and the Register has fallen victim to it just as much as any other paper. And that's in contrast, like KCCI, which is making plenty of money. It's a totally different media format, and they have I mean, TV is a different format, and it's harder. It is harder to. You can't put anything in context in like a 30-second news clip, but they also should be held to a far higher standard than what they are. There are TV outlets in local places around the country that do have really good investigative journalism, but there's certainly nothing like that in Central Iowa or
No. Well,
really
and a
anywhere I can think of in Iowa.
lot of the Midwest and like smaller places too have, like media conglomerates owning major like news, right? A lot of right wing media. I don't quite know the details to that
Oh
super
yeah,
well,
like
but that's what I.
Sinclair and all that. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
problems with that. Yeah.
Is KCCI owned by Sinclair? I'm not
No, they're
aware of that.
Hearst.
Hertz. Okay, gotcha. Do you know if that's got like a right wing bend, or is it just kind of a, I don't know.
Not like Sinclair. I don't want to speak too much about that because I haven't read about them recently, so I'm not sure
Okay, gotcha.
what their current, kind of ownership
Status, yeah,
management kind of thing is. But yes,
yeah.
not like the explicit right wing, like forcing all their networks or all their stations to run, pro Trump segments and stuff like that. Like
Yeah. Oh my god.
Sinclair.
Yeah. It's good that that's not the case, but yeah, you have like a lot of places, especially in buttfuck nowhere Midwest, have these kind of like stations that are run primarily by like Sinclair or something like that, and that's kind of their main source of news. Although I guess with the internet, you have more options now, but when it comes to like your older folks, like that's where they're getting their information from is that
Yeah, and
stuff.
you talked about Trump and like why is Iowa the way it is now, and part of that is almost more negative when local news really drops the ball on informing the communities, and that's a huge problem with print media because it's impossible. Like the Ames Tribune, when I was a city reporter there, I was covering every city council meeting, every county board of supervisors meeting. We had
Mm-hmm.
a courts reporter who was pretty committed to that. And now, if you look at the Tribune, they hardly ever cover local politics, local city government, and it's just how do people easily this is nothing original I'm saying here, but they turn to whatever it is, Facebook or whatever website. It's very easy to get in your
Mm-hmm.
own like echo chamber or whatever in the news. You can find news that confirms your own preconceived views or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's also not local news; it's national news, and that trickles down where like I think
Yeah.
you're pro Trump on a national level, then you start to see that or look for that in local. Your own community or local politics, and that I think really definitely drives polarization and stuff you see with like school boards and
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring that up because I don't know, that's a big battleground for the right now. It seems like the grooming freak out and all of that kind of anti-LGBTQ stuff that's kind of going over the country right now. I was thinking of what you were just saying there, where most people get like national news because they don't have good reporting like on local politics, and so you have a figure like Tucker Carlson who has made an entire news segment about a TikTok he found. Um, that, and then kind of is like, oh, this is the epidemic of what's going on in your schools. And then because of that, people throughout the country, including Iowa, start showing up at their school boards angry about a TikTok that Tucker Carlson found and blaming their local school board for it.
that shit's
And
so
it's
awful.
wild. Yeah.
Like that
What's
Elizabeth
the
TikTok account has targeted Iowans like repeatedly.
I didn't know that. There was like specific Iowans they went after.
Yeah, I think there's some drag show in Ankeny that this
Uh,
school district allowed. It wasn't like I can't remember the details, but there was that. There was even before that, the Ames Public Library, a librarian who used to work there. She, I know her pretty well, and she organized the what do they call them? The the drag, book readings,
storybook hours.
story times.
Yeah.
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 She got that going there, and it was really cool. Really, it's a positive thing for the community. But also, I mean, she was targeted by, or the library was targeted by Alex Jones and all this stuff. It
Jesus.
was fucking crazy, and it's yeah. So I mean, predates. It's been going on for several
Yeah.
years. I mean, Trump. 2016. And it's been.
It's been a shift. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you wrote an article. When I say recently, I think it's been half a year now. But you were talking about kind of moral panics in schools in Iowa.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
the
Do you
the Photoshop
what's
penis one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you kind of see happening with local kind of moral freakouts around schools? I don't know.
Well, so I grew up in Ankeny, went to Ankeny High School, so that's been really bizarre watching the QAnon moms.
Oh
Ankeny is a much
God.
different town now. It's actually trending Democratic.
Yeah.
A bit. It was never like a liberal place. It was very white, very religious, very conservative. When I went to school there during the Bush
Yeah.
administration was when I became politically awakened or radicalized initially. I think
Yeah.
Iraq War and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like 3 or 4 times the number of people living there now. It's that and Waukee, like we're two of the fastest growing suburbs, or whatever in the country, and
Hmm.
so that's been kind of a trip. Um, and that ties into what's happening at the state level and national, because all this stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with like Christopher Rufo,
Yeah.
um,
Oh yeah.
who I mean, like he's that guy's fascinating to me. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but
Yeah.
I mean, he's just open about it. He just spells it out. He's kind of just he's very bold, and he doesn't give a shit. It's not like a secret,
Yeah,
and
well,
that's
he's
the scary
broken
thing.
the discourse so repeatedly, yeah, because he's responsible for the
Yeah,
CRT thing, basically, and
right. Yeah,
yeah,
and I mean, you see that with trickling down to like with Iowa. I mean, the CRT thing, the grooming thing, the books. I mean, these are books that have been on library shelves for like the Absolutely True Diary. What was that?
oh yeah, yeah, of a
Of
part-time
an
Indian,
part-time
yeah,
Indian. Yeah, I mean
yeah,
that
yeah.
book was I mean it's been on the controversial book list of the ALA for a
Which
decade or
is
something, and there's never any like huge panic about it. Legislators, it's obviously just political grandstanding and opportunism. It's so transparently obvious, and but yeah,
yeah,
it's they like the craziest thing with that article that you mentioned was,
hmm,
or I don't know what the craziest thing was, but Brad Zahn, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee,
yeah,
that guy, he's talking about how, I mean, he's completely butchering the definition of what child pornography is. He was at a Greater Des Moines Partnership panel, and of course, no one calls him out on it. They never do, because he's speaking civilly, and I mean, he wasn't really. He's like pounding he's like up and and it's like it's just a fucking act. I mean, he's
yeah.
saying that, what was it? If I don't have it up in front of me, but if someone emails like something like basically like the concepts like someone emails pornography to a minor, that's child pornography or something. It's like not even close to what the actual definition
That's
of child
not the legal
pornography is.
definition at all.
And it's like he surely knows that, and if he doesn't, like, why is he the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee? I mean, that should concern every like fair-minded Iowan. But
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone even wrote about that or noticed that in the video that the Des Moines Business Partnership, or whatever it's called, Greater Des Moines Partnership, put on YouTube. But
yeah, yeah.
like,
Um,
it's so many examples of that. It's just exhausting to follow it on a regular basis. But I
I
mean, those are the
bet.
people who are calling the shots in the state, who are forming, public policy, and it's scary, because I don't have to go on and on about this, or but the public schools were, the back of the quarter in Iowa is a one-room schoolhouse, foundation and education, and
Hmm.
Republicans will talk about how they've increased funding for public schools, but there's no context to that because they're every time giving less than what's needed. They're raising the amount of funding by nowhere close to what's needed or asked for by administrators and the people working in and with the schools that know the most
Hmm.
about their needs. And now they're just openly just trying to just tear public schools apart. And it's really
Yeah,
it's alarming. It's sad because there's so little political pushback. There's Democrats have no power at all, except for Rob Sand can audit some things here and there, but Tom Miller is doing nothing as the Attorney General, and
yeah.
beyond that, you got pretty much nothing.
Yeah, do you see any sort of like left backlash to this stuff happening in Iowa at all? Do you anticipate that in the future, or are we just kind of headed down this path?
I mean, if I had to get, well, I mean, I think that what's happening in Iowa, again, like I said earlier, is happening across the United States, and I think that the way out of this, might follow a similar trend and just
Hmm.
kind of ride the political tides. I don't know. I mean, some of this is really hard to push back against a tidal wave. That's just it's kind of like the wave of populism, that brought Trump to power.
Yeah.
It's easy to criticize Democrats and Democratic inaction. I think a lot of that is very deserved, and I do plenty of it myself.
Yeah.
And it's easy to sound off on Twitter. I mean, what am I doing to try to organize against it? I don't know, but
Yeah.
do the informer, I guess. I mean, I don't think that's for nothing, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
wish that there was stronger political resistance, because it seems like there are definitely many people in Iowa who are very upset and rightfully alarmed, like I said, about what's going on here. And there is organizing against it, both within the electoral system and outside of it, and I think both are necessary. But yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see
more.
Yeah, and especially within, like, institutionally within the Democratic Party, like, there are a lot of good people doing good work and trying to push back in a stronger way, but there's institutionally, I don't think they're doing that.
Yeah. Well, and even externally, like I might be wrong at this, but when I think of like ICCI or some of the local progressive orgs, I don't think the school board stuff is their focus, which that's not really a critique of them, because they're focusing on like environmental issues, for instance, which is really necessary.
Yeah, like they've always been strong on CAFOs and things like that. And
yeah. But yeah, you don't really see like, I don't know, any leftists going to school boards, and maybe that's partially just like people with kids from Iowa don't usually stay in Iowa. Like they usually moved when they were younger or whatever. There's kind of a pretty bad you go to college here and then you bounce and head to a coast or something.
There has been a lot of really strong, I would say, inspiring pushback from students.
Good.
Within the school districts. You've seen that in some of these districts where they're debating book bans. I'm trying to think of, like, Ankeny, there were students coming, Johnston, and there's that whole thing with Turning Point USA in Johnston, I think, that allowing the student group.
Well, there's been the battle over trans athletes as well.
Yeah.
And I recall seeing some of the students pushing back against that.
Yeah, and you're right, that a lot of them are going to leave Iowa. And I mean, I left Iowa. I came back because I wanted to try to do journalism here, and which I guess I pulled off for a while, and I'm kind of trying to figure out what my next steps are here. But it's unfortunate to see people just so disillusioned with their state. I mean, I get it's Iowa. I mean, like, it's fun and I would encourage everyone to travel and not just live and settle down in the community they grew up in. It's great if you have the ability to spread your wings, and go to the coasts and bigger cities and things like that. It's a great just human experience. But
we do need people like fighting the battle here, though, and so that's kind
the
of
brain drain thing is a real thing.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, hopefully we start to see some of that, but like, I don't know how long I'll end up in Iowa. I don't know how long. Everybody, a lot of people I think of as like, just good friends of mine who are progressives usually end up leaving, which is understandable because I mean the direction here just looks bad. But I don't know.
That's kind of why I want to stay. I mean, especially if I stick with journalism, because like you said, there needs to be people everywhere, fighting for what's right, and it's pushing back against all this crap. What's really demoralizing about it is just seeing how effective all this moral panic messaging is. So much of the conservative worldview, I think, is kind of inherent to that in a lot of ways, where fear-based messaging is just, in a psychological sense, it's effective. It's simple. It's black and white thinking. It's strips out all the nuance, and the right, I think, has always been better at that than the left. It's and I don't think I should do that.
Yeah, the left has a difficulty with like moral language, I think, like getting kind of like I would almost love to see if there was like a moral panic over climate change. You know what I mean? Like,
and what would that even look like?
I have no idea, but it's like I think the right has proven it's a good way to rally people, but like how do you do that from the left? I have no idea,
Yeah, and it's just part of it is just how low do you want to go, and I don't know that I want to see that from the left. Like I don't want to be
yeah,
associated with a movement like that either. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It's complex.
yeah,
I forget what I was saying before that.
yeah.
Well, it sounds demoralizing to
Mhm.
try to fight back against it, and like so much of what I have written at the Informer has been debunking conspiracy stuff or just trying to expose it, I guess, more so. And
Yeah.
I think that's important to get on the record, but then it's like I'm responding to them. It's so reactive, and I think it's a problem with the Democratic Party too. So I guess I'm guilty of the same thing. I feel like
Mhm.
in a lot of my writing or some of my writing, where you're responding, you're not pushing the narrative in the opposite direction. I guess that's part of it, but it's
Mhm.
just hard to. I don't have any. I'm spinning my wheels here as I'm saying this, and it's
Yeah.
something I wish I had a better answer to.
Yeah, I mean, well, because I think part of it is because I think the right has had a victory over how we see the future. Because I think it's really, really hard to imagine a progressive future right now. Like with the victories that the right is having, it's like kind of hard to imagine, like to think almost like utopian or in any sort of way about like where things could go.
Well, yeah, and
They've
especially with the courts, and that's a
yeah,
generational thing. I mean, probably.
yeah,
And Reynolds is kind of packed the courts in Iowa, the Supreme Courts, and
yeah.
a lot of boards and stuff too. Even sometimes in violation of Iowa law, I believe. We're supposed to have like partisan equity on boards and commissions and stuff.
No, we don't.
Um, yeah, they're Republicans are really, or independents who are actually Republicans for all intents and purposes, or
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like there's a lot of stuff to contend with,
hmm
baked into the
Yeah.
institutions and stuff now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I guess yeah, it's demoralizing, but like yeah, like we've been saying we do need people who stay in the Midwest and fight the battle primarily because what's been on my mind a lot lately has been climate change. And for whether we like it or not, the Midwest is going to be a refuge for a lot of kind of the people fleeing from climate catastrophe on the coasts or the global south or whatever. And so like, yeah, we do need a kind of a battle here over making this an equitable place for immigrants and people who have to escape here. And as it currently stands, it's so not.
Yeah. Well, the hard thing about this is a little bit of a tangent, but kind of like going back to what you were saying about like with climate change, there's a moral panic over that. I mean, climate change is a really hard issue politically, I think, because it seems so intangible
Mhm.
and far off. It's not something that it's clearly. I mean, you can look at changing weather patterns and stuff like that and being like, okay, this is like affecting us, like the
Yeah.
derecho. But it's hard to show scientifically with a lot of this stuff. Like, is that climate change? Is that just like a weather anomaly? Because there's weather versus climate and
Mhm.
everything, and just it's harder to see like the direct impact to like individuals' lives, I think, in like the immediate the immediacy of it anyway. Whereas like a moral panic over like transgender individuals, you can see that it's like they are like it's us and them and there are others, and you can
Mhm.
really just it's a much simpler thing where you can see this person in front of you, you can demonize them and say they're a sexual deviant and stuff like that, and it's much more
Yeah.
this base kind of thing. It's if
Mhm.
that's how I've always kind of thought of like that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, I guess.
Yeah. That I guess how do you like frame more leftist things in a more like immediate way as I think kind of a challenge because like I
I
could
think it was
think of
stuff
like
like, well, sorry.
well, I was gonna say stuff like unions and stuff like that. You can more tangibly talk to somebody and be like, your boss screws you over. Like you could organize and he could not screw you over anymore.
Yeah, I think that what you saw with the John Deere protest, that crosses,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, you know, partisan lines, or it's not even about that. But the John Deere
Mm,
protests were interesting because I was in Ankeny at the time when that was happening, and
mm,
that was cool. Just especially because it's also the same time when the QAnon moms and the Stacey Pierce, this QAnon crazy QAnon guy who's harassing and threatening the school board. So it's like you see, it's a nice study in contrast there to see something positive with the union organizing. And
going on at the same time. Yeah.
Another thing too, I think, is like a left thing that's more tangible, much more tangible than like climate change is like universal health care, because I don't know who can honestly look at the U.S. healthcare system and say it's fair or just in any sort of way. I
Yeah.
mean, there's just horror stories left and right every day, every hour of every day, probably. I mean, it's nauseating, and it's just
Yeah, well, I think what makes climate change tangible to people hasn't happened a ton in Iowa, to my knowledge, but it's been like fracking. It's been like suddenly an energy company is fracking in your backyard, but we haven't really had a ton of that in Iowa, so that kind of makes me nervous that there won't be as much of the realization of predatory extraction like that.
I
I
was
don't know.
thinking kind of like specific to Iowa too when I was saying that, but I mean, you do have the carbon
Yeah,
uh, pipeline, and then the Dakota Access Pipeline before that. That's another thing that
yeah,
Democrats could, I think, capitalize. Poor
they
choice of
could have.
words there after what I said about healthcare, but like on politically more effectively than I think they, far more effectively than I think they have, because that's
Well, I
another thing
mean,
where the Dakota Access Pipeline
yeah,
opposition has very interesting uh, cross party line coalition. I remember one of the guys who I interviewed the most, a landowner who was very opposed to it being dug under his property that was in his family for generations, I believe. He died not too long ago, and incidentally, when I was doing campaign finance research on Steve King, he was a Steve King donor, and he was, like he was the guy who was siding with ICCI, which is you know, organized protest
progressive.
against
Yeah.
Steve King, and yeah, so
It's really well. It's yeah, because that makes it a lot more tangible. Yeah, once it's your backyard that's getting dug up for a pipeline or whatever.
yeah. And for him, it wasn't a
Um,
climate issue, but I mean, climate is inherent in in
yeah,
fossil fuel extraction and transportation and stuff. So there's
yeah. Well, that's a big thing.
indirectly, I guess.
Naomi Klein talks a lot about that of like how to organize climate stuff. She was really into pushing for like organizing more in like a local decentralized way where it's more like, okay, this community gets pissed off at the oil or like the coal plant in their
Sure, yeah.
neighborhood rather than try to like do a sweeping thing because it's much more tangible. It's like, okay, well, I can't breathe here because they're burning coal there. It's more,
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
don't
sure.
know. Yeah. But like with Des Moines, I can't think of like pollution in a way that's like, I don't know, would piss me off directly because it like impacts me, you know?
I mean, the biggest pollution problem in Iowa has got to be the just hog shit in all our water supply, like
Yeah.
all the CAFOs, and um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Well,
that
and the river keeps flooding in Des Moines like once every couple years. I mean, that's a climate change thing, whether we admit it or
uh,
not.
the nitrates and everything in the water is,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, that flows down to the Gulf and contributes to the dead zone there, and all
Yeah.
that contributes to climate issues. So I guess there is, stuff, but I mean,
Yeah.
I
But
don't.
that,
It's
good. Sorry.
no, no, no. What are you gonna say? I'm just
I was gonna say like the problem with that is like that the impact is happening so far away that like with the
yeah,
nitrate kind of
yeah,
with
yeah.
agricultural practices. I don't know. But maybe you could probably rally people around trying to break up like the big agriculture like corporations. Um like the way it's so monopolized. Yeah, maybe you could get farmers in on something like that. But I don't know.
Wouldn't be easy, but yeah, I would.
I'd be
It'd be nice to
interested.
see. And of course, I
Yeah.
know people are trying to do stuff like that. It's not completely absent from organizing or anything, but
Yeah. Well, I think we're about hitting the end here. I guess I guess we've said a lot of downer stuff about the direction of Iowa politics.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're kind of hopeful about at all in the state of Iowa politics? I
Yeah,
don't
sorry,
know.
I'm a cynic.
I am too. That's why I go this direction as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like Indira getting elected to the Des Moines City Council, Jalen, he got beat by a pretty large margin, but I mean wasn't that the high, like they poured more money into that state house
Mhm.
race than I think any other one. And
Yeah.
those local activism. I mean, I spoke about this a little bit earlier. That I'm hopeful about, and that's great to see. It's great to see people organizing on the streets, just and speaking for what they believe in and what is just,
Mhm.
and not worrying about the naysayers who are more concerned about, oh man, it's going to cost Democrats some votes or something if we're too critical of the police. It's like, that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and someone needs to be doing it. We can't just expect any sort of change to happen if we just ignore the issue. And I think that, I mean, all politics starts locally and all that. You've talked
Yeah.
about that just a minute ago with climate change stuff and things like that. I think that is where, I mean, again, there's reasons to be pessimistic about that too, with like school boards and this whole
Mhm.
organizing over moral panics across the country to try to get right wing people on local school boards, but the left can do that too.
Yeah.
And so things like that, I'm hopeful about. I recently just moved to Urbandale, and Ale is another one who's running for state senate, an independent campaign in Des Moines area in Des Moines.
Yeah.
And I met them and Jalen for the first time not too long ago at
Yeah.
a campaign event, and that's great. It's great to be around people like that. It's kind of like what you said. Some of the people you hang out with who are fellow progressives, and
Mhm.
there's power in numbers and strength in numbers, and even if
Yeah.
it's on a small level, it's that makes me optimistic, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's good. I didn't
Well, and not
even
optimistic, but
I didn't even think to bring up yeah, we've had a couple electoral victories recently, so hopefully that marks kind of a change, but I guess only time will tell.
it's good to see
Um
that in the national news when Iowa's so often in the national news for really awful shit, like the library and was it Vinton closed for the first time since 1904 when it was first opened because they scared off
oh,
the library director with the
yeah,
electric.
over LGBTQ stuff. Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and they had like a
Um
Kamala Harris book that someone requested, so they had that on display, and they were like, "We need a Trump book too," and just ridiculous shit. It's just completely absurd. But that
yeah.
Iowa's so often in the news for things like that. Like I just said, it's so it's nice to
Yeah.
like when Indira won, there were national headlines about how like a defund the police candidate can win, and
Yeah.
one of the first, it was like the third person of color on the city council. I think I saw
Yeah.
like in its history.
Yeah,
I
I
think that's what I
guess
read.
what I hope is that, yeah, like BLM and the protests in 2020 could represent slowly like a bunch of these like local battles getting won throughout the country that we might not even be aware of because they won't get national attention, but like, that's how the right was been so successful in the last few decades, is they fought a lot of local battles for a long time. And so
Yeah,
maybe that's what we all need to be doing, is just grinding at our home and trying to make it
people
better.
and people get too hung up on the image, like I said, where it has to start somewhere. You have to like introduce it to people. It has to become part of the conversation. It has to be part of just like public awareness
Hmm.
before it's going to gain any sort of foothold. You can't, just because something is unpopular or unfamiliar to people doesn't mean you should shy away from it. I mean, you guys start
You got to start. I mean,
somewhere.
what? I mean, like it's kind of a learn from the right and do it from the left kind of thing in a lot of ways. I mean, look at how fucking unpopular pro life stuff has been for a long time, and yet here we are, like living in the country they've kind of created. So
Yep.
fighting the battle, even when it's unpopular, could work. It's just maybe do that for good.
Yeah. It'd be nice to see. It'd be nice to
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
well, thank you for coming on here. This was rad. Yeah, and
yeah.
you said
Thanks
you're in
for
Urbandale now. We should
yeah.
get a beer or something soon.
All right, yeah, sounds good. Let me know.